So I'm going to the new Superman movie this weekend with my brother, who's this lifelong Superman fan, right? There's just one problem with that. I'm not really a fan of Superman.
How dare you?
I was what you might refer to as a Spider-Man kid growing up. In fact, whenever my little brother would try to get me to watch Superman, I'd always find a way to get out of it. Now, I don't know why I was such a mean-spirited 7-year-old child, but what I do know is I've only ever seen one Superman film. Okay, well, actually, no, I've seen two, technically. I've seen Batman vs. Superman, but that was for the Batman series, whatever. I've seen one other Superman film, and I didn't really like it. So, given that I'm a grown-ass man and not a petulant 7-year-old kid anymore, instead of bailing on this film yet again with my brother, I've decided to do what I do best. Immerse myself in every single live-action Superman film ever released, and hopefully, along the way, finally become the excited companion my brother deserved to see those films with all those years ago. So, just how many Superman movies are we talking? Oh my god. Superman vs. Molemen. Alright, I'm not gonna lie to you, jumping into this Superman marathon through 1951's Superman and the Molemen didn't exactly fill me with excitement. From the word go, I was greeted by an aggressively 1950s title sequence and general aesthetic. I could feel my 7-year-old self screaming, begging to watch absolutely anything else. But I gotta start somewhere, I guess, and this 58-minute long black and white fever dream is Soup's first foray into the live-action film space, it seems. But to tell you the truth, if all this film managed to do was throw together some campy costumes, simple effects, and a few unfortunate but bigoted attitudes wrapped up in red, white, and blue, I'd call this film as antiquated as you might have expected it to be as a feature film in the 50s and quickly moved on. But this film pleasantly surprised me, actually. Now, of course, you should temper your expectations. This film looks every bit its age, complete with handmade costumes, primitive flying effects, and a community theater budget, but underneath, troublingly, is a story that feels all the more relevant today than it perhaps did 70 years ago. So here's the brief rundown, right? Clark and Lois get sent to cover the world's deepest oil well, thrilling, which accidentally reveals an underground civilization. These are our titular Molemen. The townspeople, terrified by this discovery, immediately form an angry mob to defend themselves and their own from this subterranean threat. But here's the kicker. This movie isn't about Superman fighting Molemen, nor does it feature him fighting some monster. This is a Superman film wherein he protects the innocent from us. That's right! In this low-budget 1951 Superman TV show pilot, the story details the challenges humans have with bigotry and prejudice. When the Molemen get shot, Superman takes them to hospital. When the crowd gets violent, he doesn't punch his way through, he talks them down and makes appeals to their humanity.
It's men like you that make it difficult for people to understand one another.
Going in, I expected a hollow American symbol spouting about truth, justice, and the American way, but instead, I found a character with a moral consistency that transcends national pride during a period when national pride was at an all-time high in the United States. In a strange way, if this message had been packaged in a more modern, high-budget film, it might not have hit me as profoundly as it did. It's one thing to stand by your ideals when it's fashionable to do so in 2025, but it's another thing entirely to champion those principles during a time when so much injustice was still going on unacknowledged around the world and in America specifically. What this film proved to me was that Superman wasn't aligned with a country, but rather an ideal. And in 1951, while America was deep in Cold War propaganda, this little Superman movie quietly and courageously argued that our first instinct as human beings should be compassion, not suspicion. While not amazing by any stretch of the imagination, that moral clarity hit me harder than any big budget spectacle could have, I think. It's strange to call something that looks this dated timeless, but when the story cuts this deep, I'm willing to look past every aged visual element. In short, I think I'm starting to understand what my brother saw in this character. Alright, forget everything you think you know about anime game collabs because Crystal of Atlan just dropped one of the coolest crossovers I've ever seen. Introducing Boom! One Punch KO, featuring the Caped Baldy himself. If you're not aware, Crystal of Atlan is a full-blown action MMO with insane high-speed aerial combat. 12 classes, no character gotcha, you're just zipping through the sky chaining spells and melee combos together like an anime come to life, which sure is appropriate cause hey, Now the One Punch Man gang is here. Boros has just landed as a brand new raid boss you can tackle solo or in a 4-man party, so, good luck with that nightmare. After he's beaten the ever-loving hell out of you, you can at least turn into Saitama and enjoy this incredible run animation. 11 out of 10, no notes. But that's just the start. Tatsumaki can now accompany you as a floating companion, adding a little psychic spice to your travels and battles. You'll also find Genos and Fubuki showing up as sick-ass mounts, and yeah, there's a joke in here about writing these characters, but I'm 34 with 3 kids, and frankly, I hate that this even came to my head in the first place. Anyway, there's a brand new class too. This is Mistrix, an offshoot of the Musketeer class. She can literally transform her weapon case into a motorcycle and launch enemies into the air, so yeah, that's pretty much the coolest thing ever. With a brand new class and all kinds of One Punch Man themed goodies to collect, this update is packed. Whether you're on iOS, Android, PC, or PlayStation 5, you can download Crystal of Atlan using my link in the description. The collab ends on July 26th, so jump in now. Superman 1978. Now, naturally, when I began preparing for this video, I wanted to reach out to my brother to ask him a few questions, but what I didn't expect was his immediate response after I told him I was about to watch every Superman film in order. Save me a seat, I'll be there in 5. If nothing else, it's kind of cool that after all these years, I get to finally sit down and watch these movies my brother had been trying and begging to share with me since we were little kids. And you know what? As soon as this one started, I recognized it from being on in the background in our living room. With that said, I was still feeling pretty good about myself coming off the back of the visually dated but thematically resonant 1951 Moleman film that my brother hadn't even seen himself. So I booted up the 1970s film expecting 1970s cheese, complete with obvious wires, campy dialogue, and countless bell-bottom jeans, and what I got was John Williams. When that theme kicked in, 2 things happened. Number 1, goosebumps enveloped my entire person, and number 2, I realized just how stupid I'd been. Within the confines of this video, Superman from 1978 was a name to check off on this list. But through thinking of it in this way, I had unintentionally forgotten the most obvious detail. This is one of the most legendary and influential films of all time. My not having seen this is the superhero equivalent of never having seen The Godfather, which is a fitting comparison, by the way, because the guy who wrote The Godfather also wrote this. You think Robert Downey Jr. was an ambitious reach for a superhero film in 2008? Try Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman at the peaks of their respective careers. In the same year, Grease came out. To this day, that John Williams theme is recognized as the single most iconic superhero motif ever created. Iron Man, Captain America, the Avengers, they might be sitting atop the box office in a greater capacity, but this Superman theme is what established the literal sound of superheroes. Listen to any superhero theme today and you'll hear echoes of what Williams created that day. And that's just the music. Visually, this film establishes pretty much every other superhero trope you could think of. The heroic theme during fight scenes, the love interest falling from impossible heights, the secret identity so obvious it's insulting, and so many more. So yeah, instead of going the safe, campy Adam West Batman route, they treated this like The Godfather with a cape. Talk about swinging for the fences. And honestly, I don't think they could have chosen a more righteous and worthy character to pave the way with. The tagline of the film, "You'll believe a man can fly," feels sensationalistic up front, but when you start the film, you can appreciate why it's not. The film, entitled Superman, chooses to kick off this superhero era not with an action scene or a jaw-dropping special effect, but instead it begins with a child reading the original comic book during the 1930s, when the US was on the cusp of war and in the throes of the Great Depression. And that's when it hits you that Superman wasn't created to convince people that a man could actually fly, but rather to grant hope to little kids that someone remarkable was looking out for them, for their mothers, and eventually their fathers who would go off to fight in the Second World War. And so, with that in mind, as I saw Superman take flight for the very first time, understanding what that must have meant to so many children, I couldn't help but start to well up. It sounds reductive and cliche to say at this point, but he's so much more than a character. Superman's a symbol, not just of strength, but of someone who refuses to compromise his ideals for an easier road ahead. He shows that even the strongest person alive can't avoid struggle and pain, but through never compromising your ideals, there's always hope for a brighter tomorrow. That's just so powerful. Also, this scene. That's so fucking cool. I knew about this scene already, but that didn't stop me from unconsciously leaning forward with my mouth open during it. And that's when I noticed something weird. My brother, the guy who used to cheer at every little Superman moment when we were kids, was now, for this entire feature, suspiciously silent. And so glancing over my shoulder, I caught him staring at me out the corner of his eye. He wasn't watching the film, he was watching my reaction to it. Superman means a lot to him. And for our entire childhood, for one reason or another, because I was, bored, I didn't do something simple that otherwise meant the world to him. As it happens, I've got a lot of catching up to do. And not just with Superman. Superman 2. Alright, I'm locked in now. Forget Superman, I'm gonna be Super Brother by the time this marathon is over. But before he left, my brother did advise me to check out the 2006 director's cut of the second Superman film instead of the theatrical release. At the time, I didn't fully understand why this mattered, but now I'm grateful he steered me in the direction that he did. As it happens, the original two films were shot mostly around the same time and designed to tell a single story split into two parts. The fact that the director didn't get his chance to finish the story the way he wanted on his terms until 2006 is crazy to me, particularly when you consider what direction the theatrical release took with his story. The humor and drama in these introductory scenes, particularly at the Daily Planet with Lois and Clark, are brilliant. Her determination to expose Clark as Superman is both funny in the lead-up and suddenly enormously dramatic when she leaps from a window to expose his true identity. Now that's conviction. Now, on top of giving Lois Lane tremendous agency over a literal super being, it also places an enormous pressure on Clark to figure out how to save Lois without revealing who he is. It's fun, inventive, and sets up their story for this film perfectly. Zod and the others, on the other hand, also serve Superman's character brilliantly through juxtaposition. They're literally from the same place Clark is, and yet they strive for global subjugation, emphasizing that what separates Superman from the most dangerous of villains isn't his supernatural abilities, but rather his good nature, making the powers themselves just amplifiers of a character's already existing personality. Which speaks to the central theme of the film, the choice between responsibility and happiness for Superman. Superman must choose between his powers and being with Lois, and Christopher Reeves' performance brilliantly embodies this internal conflict. When Lois confronts him with a gun and fires a blank, his entire demeanor changes in an instant. Through a minor fix in posture and facial expression, confidence and power oozes from the man where hesitation and meekness once took root. It's genuinely brilliant, and all I've ever heard concerning this film was how comical his portrayal was, given that it tried to sell the idea that all Clark needed to do was wear glasses to protect his identity. But through Chris's performance here, there's so much more to appreciate and be in awe of. So many little moments of clumsiness that I just refuse to believe were scripted. They had to be his own invention. There's also a scene towards the end of the film where Superman is thought to have been killed, and instead of cowering in fear, the crowd stands up to Zod and his monstrous pals. The sense of hope, humanity, and right and wrong Superman instilled in them creates this incredible scene that genuinely reminded me of that one scene on the bridge from Spider-Man 1. You know the one.
You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us!
But overall, I think the most entertaining portrayal has to be Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, playing him as this terrified man hiding behind this continuously shrinking veneer of false confidence, slowly realizing that he's not the one calling the shots with Zod around. It's incredibly entertaining and plays perfectly into his eventual character change of heart when Zod turns on him. But overall, if there was one moment in this film that I felt moved me, it was when the fight for Earth kicked off and Superman was sent flying through the Statue of Liberty. Man, oh man, that fight sure was amazing, but you know what it wasn't more amazing than? This damn cool new shirt we just launched. Myself and my team have worked on this design for a long time, and finally it's ready to release, so if you want to pick it up and support the channel, the link is in the description. It was in that moment I transcended the casual Superman fan that I was into something more. Maybe a fanatic. Suddenly, I was able to look past the admittedly dated action and visuals and embrace the heart of this character for everything that it is. Putting out fires, catching buses filled with innocent people, and just genuine kindness. This all helped put me into my brother's shoes. Finally, after 25 years, I was starting to see what he had been trying to show me all along. From start to finish, these two films were a sincerely uplifting experience that healed my soul after a few tiring months. And for the first time in my entire life, the little 7-year-old kid within me that would avoid Superman like the plague was now vibrating with excitement. Not only for the next Superman film on this list, but for what was awaiting him in a few days when we would get to finally see a modern, faithful, and inspirational adaptation of the Man of Steel. Superman 3 here we come. Superman 3 and 4. I was riding high after those first two films, genuinely excited to dive deeper into the character I'd finally learned to love. The thought of seeing more Christopher Reeve Superman adventures had me buzzing with anticipation. How could they possibly go wrong with a formula this good? What the hell happened? We had a good thing going there, didn't we? Lightning in a bottle, captured twice, and somehow it all just... I am sitting here trying to process what I just witnessed, and honestly, I feel like I've been betrayed. By fucking Superman of all people. I went into Superman 3 expecting more of what made me fall in love with the character during Superman's 1 and 2. But instead, what I got was...
He was flying! He was just flying around.
And look, I love Richard Pryor as much as the next guy, but the majority of this film felt just a little on the silly side, which can work. It's not always necessary to take yourself super seriously, of course. I mean, there's plenty of comedy in the first two films, but this, for me, crossed the line, and the result was a Superman that felt less earnest than the man who convinced me he could fly. It just felt cartoonish at times. But if that was my only criticism, I would be singing a very different story. Superman 4 somehow managed to make me root against Superman. Sidney Furie took the director's chair in this one and delivered what might be one of the most disappointing superhero films I've ever seen. And I've seen the theatrical release of Batman vs Superman. Where Superman 3 was misguided, Superman 4 was broken and borderline insulting, ultimately betraying a fundamental misunderstanding of the character. In Donner's films, Clark Kent was this beautifully crafted dual identity that Christopher Reeves made believable through subtle performance choices. Remember that moment in Superman 2 when Lois shoots a blank and the entire demeanor of his body shifts? That's Superman. But in these films, the characterization becomes broad and overly flamboyant. Superman straightens the Leaning Tower of Pisa for a laugh in the third film, and in 4, he's reduced to delivering ham-fisted speeches about nuclear disarmament like he's running for president or something. For God's sake, the junkyard fight in Superman 3 with evil Superman should have been this profound internal struggle made manifest. It was ripe for it. You can see what it could have been, but it's surrounded by trash. Literally and figuratively. Like it was afraid to take itself too seriously. Like it's embarrassed of what it is. And that, my friends, is the single worst thing a superhero film can be. Until you watch Superman 4 and you see Nuclear Man. I'm gonna leave that there. What breaks my heart is seeing how they handled, or rather mishandled, Lois Lane 2. Margot Kidder was essentially written out of Superman 3 because she criticized the studio's treatment of Donner. The woman who gave us one of cinema's greatest love stories was now replaced with whatever the fuck this was. All because she stood up for what was right, which is perhaps the most ironic thing about all of these films. And by the time she returned for Superman 4, it was obvious. The magic was gone. Not just from her performance, but from the vision behind this character. It was vapid, empty. But worst of all, these films made me realize something I didn't want to admit was there. That maybe this character only works when the right people are behind the camera. People who understand that Superman isn't just about the powers or the action, but rather that he's about hope, about inspiring people to be better. Donner understood that. Lester and Fury, not so much. But here's the thing, right? If Superman's taught me anything, is that I should still have faith that things will turn around in the end somehow. Sure, I've now seen as many bad Superman films as I've seen good ones, and yeah, part of me is starting to remember why I didn't care as much about him as my brother did back in the day. But those first two films prove that when done right, this character is genuinely extraordinary. Superman Returns is coming up next, and it's directed by Bryan Singer, who made the X-Men films work. Plus, it's designed as a direct sequel to Superman 2, basically pretending 3 and 4 never existed. That sounds like a guy who understands Superman to me. So what I'm going to do is immerse myself in this film, pretend like those other two films never happened, and get right back to enjoying what makes Superman truly timeless and special in Superman Returns. Okay, no need to be nervous. This is going to go great. After all, this is the first Superman film released during my lifetime. It has much better special effects, and I've never heard of it. Okay, so either I've been living under a rock for the last 19 years, or no one ever seems to talk about this film. Whatever, I'm sure it can't be that bad. That wasn't bad, right? Right? I mean, there's stuff there that makes a great film. We have an incredibly believable performance of Lex Luthor, worthy of following Gene Hackman, with Kevin Spacey playing a rich sociopath bent on ruining the lives of others. Okay, forget that. Let's see here. Brendon's performance, his Superman, was solid, and what really shocked me was how similar he ended up looking to Christopher Reeves when portraying Clark Kent. Everything from the clothes, to the hairstyle, to the posture, and even the expressions all screamed Christopher Reeves to me. Which is great because, as I said, this is supposed to be a direct continuation of those films. We just need to ignore the fact that Brendon Routh's performance lacks the personality and charisma Reeves injected into the role, resulting in a Superman and Clark Kent that feel both limp and boring, which, okay, in a film called Superman, probably isn't the best way for your main character to come across. Oh, and there's, Lois, who comes across as uncomfortably mean and surprisingly selfish in this film. Sure, every character has their complexities, but there's no kindness or warmth in her performance or dialogue. She treats Clark terribly, consistently lies to her supportive and kind fiancé, and keeps kissing Superman in front of her own child.
Oh, kinky.
I have no idea, honestly, what Clark sees in her. Okay, wait, no. Okay, this movie's good. It's good, I swear. The film has the best Superman live action saves that I've ever seen. The plane rescue scene is awesome. I audibly said, "This is so fucking cool," when Superman chases after the falling plane and torpedoes through an oncoming piece of flaming debris. That's heroic Superman stuff. And then again, it did take 35 minutes before we actually got to see the Superman stuff, which I just have to say really flies in the face of skipping the origin story in the first place. This film was released in 2006, putting it 26 years after the film it's trying to continue the story of. I can only imagine how the kids and the parents of those kids were when the film begins and Superman is missing. And surprisingly as well, there's not a lot of hand-holding for those who weren't caught up on the Reeves films either. We get a brief glimpse of Clark coming to grips with his powers through a flashback, but that's there primarily to service the reveal of his kid gaining his powers later on. But that's not even the most challenging part of this movie for me. Structurally, there are two separate stories within the film: Lois and Clark's relationship and Lex's crystal plot to create a new continent. Both are perfectly fine and compelling, but neither feel particularly connected until halfway through, which might not seem like an issue until you realize that by the time Clark wises up to his crystals going missing, we've sat through just shy of the runtime for Superman 4. And I don't ever want to think about Superman 4. Okay, no. This film's good. It's good. I can prove it. Look, the action set piece in Metropolis is genuinely awesome and features plenty of variety when it comes to Superman's power set. We got heat vision, flight, super strength, and even ice breath. But that's not even the best part. This scene pulls double duty by helping to facilitate the single best Superman scene I've ever come across. And the best part was that Superman didn't play a direct role in it. I'm talking about the Richard rescue scene. Trapped in a room in the middle of the ocean, we anticipate that Superman's powers will free them, or maybe the kid will use his powers to save the day. But instead, Richard shows up. It's brilliant misdirection that perfectly encapsulates why he's a better fit to be the child's father than Superman. While Superman is responsible for the entire world, to Richard, that little kid is his entire world. This is what Superman's story should be about: uplifting people and their characters through scenes that prove one doesn't need superpowers to save the day.
Give me your hand.
Disappointment. The feeling of sadness or displeasure caused by the non-fulfillment of one's hopes or expectations.
The writers couldn't let us have a good thing. They had to decide to make Richard's entire effort pointless by trapping all three of them in this sinking ship together. Oh, what's that I hear? Is it Superman coming to save Richard and his family from the sinking ship? Nope, it's that 7-year-old Superman hater inside of me screaming, "Dun, dun, 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 I told you so!" It is such a massive waste of what should have been a perfect moment. And that's not even to address how reckless and idiotic Lois is seconds later after Superman sends them to safety, demanding Richard to turn the plane around and go back for Superman with no consideration for herself, her own child.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
and her fiancé. And in the process, makes him look like an idiot because he obliges even though he is unaware of the kid's powers. She could honestly scream at me all day to turn that plane around, and no force on hell or earth would allow me to drag my own child into the eye of a hurricane.
Oh, please, everyone's always on about the children.
But of course, there's still some good stuff later. I mean, that shot of Superman effectively lifting up an island with his bare hands, resisting the effects of the kryptonite. It's such a preposterous and godlike feat of strength that it almost made me forget how close this film gets to being genuinely great, only to be held back by some lacking performances, questionable characterization, and frustrating pacing and structural issues. This was supposed to be the film that brought Superman back for me, the one that proved the character could work for modern audiences. Instead, it's a beautiful looking but ultimately hollow husk of what Superman needed to be. For the first time since becoming a genuine fan of this character, I've discovered what it's like to lose faith that this important symbol of hope can be faithfully revived. And what's more is, I'm kind of starting to dread the idea of having to go and watch another one of these films. Not just for this video, but with my brother in the cinema too. Honestly, I'm trying to remain positive, but I'm running out of runway here. What I need right now is an uplifting monument to the character that will brighten my spirits and carry me with optimism into the cinema with my brother. The only problem is, I know what's coming next. Man of Steel is a good film. It might even be a great one, but it wasn't the one I needed at this time. Man of Steel tackles genuinely complicated and nuanced questions about right and wrong through this all-powerful character trying to remain morally consistent. It's dark, it's gritty, and brings a level of realism to the superhero genre unlike anything that came before it. However, while it might be a solid film, I just don't think it's a good Superman film. In this movie, we see Superman kill people and endanger many, many more. This is a conscious creative decision which facilitates the inciting incident of Batman v Superman, where Batman sees all the unchecked power and consequential destruction someone like Superman can bring to the world. And I want to make clear that isn't an uninteresting or shallow angle to take this character in. But for me, it just didn't at all feel like Superman. Way back when Batman v Superman was coming out, there was a trailer for that film released that really resonated with me and that I still think about today. The scene depicted groups of families stranded atop their roofs in the midst of a vicious storm and flood. All seemed lost until, from above, a shining light found its way through that storm. When all seemed lost and every option was thought to have been exhausted, Superman was there to save everyone. That was a magical moment, and for me, that is one of the only scenes in all of Cavill's tenure that truly captured the essence of what I now understand to be Superman's character. Now, that's not to say Cavill isn't incredible casting. I just don't need a character like Superman to be deified or for him to leave his father to die to protect his own identity. All I want is a good person who refuses to bend to the whims of evil, no matter what. Someone who can show us that when you've exhausted every last option and all seems done for, that if you hold on, good can triumph over evil. This is a challenging scene, one that asks, what can the most righteous among us do when given no other choice? And this might work for some people, and that's totally fine. But for me, it's just horrifying. Superman is supposed to be the character that when faced with two terrible choices can invent a third to save everyone. Forever, the symbol that hope and goodness is indestructible as long as you believe. Watching this movie at my low point on this journey, Man of Steel brought me face to face with a very dark and not at all uplifting version of the character I needed. Ugh, great. Okay, now I'm at a crossroads. I'm going to go watch this film with my brother one way or the other. I'd never bail on him again, but he's gonna know now. He's gonna see right through my act of false enthusiasm. Should I just come clean? Tell him that the last thing I want to do right now is to sit through another Superman movie destined to miss the mark, but I'll do it anyway because I love him? Well, maybe not. You see, right as I was staring at my phone trying to figure out how to break the news to my brother, an interview with James Gunn and David Cornswet autoplayed on YouTube. One where they discuss the controversial question of whether Superman should wear trunks or not. James said, and I quote, "I talked to Zack Snyder, who said that he tried a billion different versions with the trunks and that he couldn't get there with it. And I was feeling the exact same way, but David said something that really affected me. And what David said was that Superman wants kids to not be afraid of him. If you stop and take a glance at Man of Steel, Superman can be terrifying. He's this unstoppable alien that can shoot beams out of his eyes and destroy buildings with a single breath. The costume, therefore, and its inherent silliness, is and always has been the symbol of his humanity, a physical expression of his own inherent desire to help children feel safe during times of extreme darkness. And if you think about it, that's exactly what this character has always needed to be.